So what led to this violence in the state? What was the cause of these groups clashing with each other?
Actually, the main whatever we can see on the surface is about the reservation, about the ST status being claimed by the Mayplees in the state, on which the cookies earlier actually the how it started was the cookies started protesting against the ST status to be given to the Mayplees for certain reasons that both the communities cited. But later on, a lot of forces, outward forces came in, and then the violence also spread into the state, around the state. It started in particularly when the first incident of violence started, it was in Surachandpur and the areas adjacent to it, where the Kukis and the Meiteis are inhabiting. But the point is that later on, quite a few outward forces started acting on it, and the violence spread like anything. And it's been like 1 month now that the internet is suspended in the state of Manipur. It will be extended until 31st May. But we can see a lot of Manipuri people actually being very much active on internet. So how they are acting, are there forces outside the state who are trying to spread a propaganda for our communities or for both the communities are still will have to be made out. But we can see that this is until 31st of May, internet is banned in the state. It's been almost a month there of internet ban in the state, of these kind of violence coming in from the state. So many thousands of people have lost their lives. They have been dislocated. Over 70 people have lost their lives.
All right, Preeti, thank you for giving us all those details. We'll keep tracking this story for more updates. As the tensions continue in the northeastern state of Manipur, Chief Minister N. Biren Singh has appealed to the people to maintain calm in the state. Chief Minister further added that over 40 armed Kukis have been gunned down by the security forces in the state. Meanwhile, the army and Assam rifles are deployed in sensitive areas, and the internet services will be remaining shut till May 31st.
No, just mass combing operations along with the helicopter surveillance has started, and we're trying to find out the culprits, those militants who are attacking the civilians.
Our Honorable Home Minister, Mr. Amit Jhaji, is coming to Manipur for the 3 days. So we request and appeal to him to take the necessary steps and action as early as possible in his journey, because this is not a time to negotiate and this is not a time to talk about the peace, because if this action is not taken to the earliest, the Manipur will vanish.
CNN News 18's Preeti is joining us on this story. Preeti, can you tell us what is the current situation in the state of Manipur?
There are fresh reports of violence coming in every day from the state of Manipur, the violence in the state of Manipur. And even yesterday also we could see that MLA K. Raghumani's house was attacked by an unruly mob, where one person was also injured by a bullet. So you see, every day there are also this kind of incidents. This was the fourth instance that came in 1 week of attacks being happening on political leaders. So today the Union Home Minister Amit Shah also had to visit Manipur. They are expecting him today, but because the situations there in Manipur are still not much in favor of any kind of a political leader being there, because you see in the last 1 week itself, 4 attacks have happened on political leaders. And yesterday, one person was also injured. And along with that, we can see that yesterday Chief Minister Biren Singh made a huge revelation where he stated that there are militants who are working with arms, and almost 33 militants have been killed in retaliation by the armed forces. He has stated that the state is very much concerned about the peace and security of the state, but yes, some militants who are working on behalf of certain communities are coming in, and then they are trying to create
Namaskar, you're watching Vantage. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. finally kicked off its counter-offensive. It isn't a big bang operation yet, at least not at the moment. Ukraine is conducting missile attacks, shaping operations designed to break the Russian defenses before an all-out attack. There's no room for mistakes. Kyiv only gets one chance at this. If it fails, it could be forced to compromise on Russia's terms on the negotiating table. So what is Ukraine's game plan? Tonight, we'll get you the specifics. Also on the show, ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US, there's a call for India to join hands with the NATO should New Delhi go ahead. We'll tell you all about the proposal. China's Wuhan is naming and shaming borrowers to get their money back. And the water in the world's famous canals of Venice has suddenly turned green. The world is scratching their heads for an answer. All that and much more coming up in the next 60 minutes. I'm Akanksha Swaroop, filling in for Palki Sharma. First up, the headlines. Japan puts its missile defenses on alert. It comes after North Korea informed Tokyo of an upcoming satellite launch. Pyongyang says the launch will take place between 31st May and 11th June. Japan vows to shoot down any projectile threatening its territory. Kingmaker Bola Tinubu, sworn in as Nigeria's president. He succeeds Muhammadu Buhari, a former general who stepped down after 2 terms in office. Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation and is facing a sea of economic troubles. It's election season all around. Spanish Prime Minister calls for snap elections. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says the surprise elections will be held on July 23rd. The move comes after his party suffered major setback in local and regional polls. PricewaterhouseCoopers Australia places 9 partners on leave. It also overhauls its governance board. PwC Australia is under fire over the leak of confidential government tax plans. The Australian police have begun a criminal investigation into the matter. And Shanghai records its hottest May day in 100 years. The biggest Chinese city shatters the previous high by a full degree. Scientists say global warming is aggravating the adverse weather. Many countries are experiencing deadly heat waves with temperatures hitting record high. It has begun. Ukraine's much-awaited counter-offensive is underway. Kyiv made the announcement in a rather dramatic fashion.
Україна, рідна земля мати. Господь, Отець наш Небесний. Благословіть. Благословіть! Я йду знищувати! Ворогів землі рідної! Ми своїх братів! Благословіть моїх посадок! Нехай рука моя буде твердою, щоб вбивати ворогів. Нехай око моє буде ясним, щоб вбивати ворогів. Нехай зброя моя буде справною, щоб вбивати ворогів. Нехай воля моя буде сталь, щоб вбивати ворогів. Україно, рідна земля мати. Господь, Отець наш Небесний, благословіть наш рішучий наступ.
Yes, a Hollywood-styled video to announce the counter-offensive. But Ukraine is going to need more than that. This is perhaps Zelensky's last chance. The war in Ukraine began 15 months ago. So far, Russia has dictated the pace of this conflict. Kyiv is trying to turn the tables. It wants to gain an upper hand and push Russia into submission. That's the objective of Ukraine's counter-offensive. Kyiv has spent months preparing for this. The expectations are high. So what are Ukraine's plans? Tonight, we'll tell you. We begin with what's happening on the ground. Ukraine says preliminary operations are underway. There is a spike in missile attacks by Ukraine. Where? Inside Russian-occupied territories. Those areas that Ukraine calls its own. Ukraine is hitting Russian military positions there. An advisor to Zelensky has spoken out. He says, and I quote, "It's a complicated process, which is not a matter of one day or a certain date or a certain hour. It's an ongoing process of deoccupation, and certain processes are already happening, like destroying supply lines or blowing up depots behind the lines." So, Those are the targets. Russian military command centers, supply depots, basically anything that helps the Russian forces maintain their positions. This is Russia's military infrastructure on the front lines. Ukraine is trying to dismantle it. The goal is to weaken the Russian forces before the Ukrainian troops can move forward and engage the Russian troops in direct combat. This is what military strategists call, quote-unquote, shaping operations. What are shaping operations? These are a set of military tactics. They are used ahead of a major offensive, either to weaken the enemy or to distract them on the battlefield. Ukraine could be trying to do both. With its own shaping operations, what will be Kyiv's next step? They're not saying much, presumably to retain the element of surprise. But reports say Kyiv's focus will remain on the east and south, where the Russian forces have dug in. I'm talking about this area. From Crimea in the south to the Donbass in the east, this entire region is in Russian control. Ukrainian forces will strike in these areas. That's a guarantee. What do they hope to achieve? Kyiv has a specific aim for this counteroffensive. They want to influence the outcome of the war. What are the possible scenarios? Number one, Ukraine's counteroffensive is successful. That would mean Russia losing control of occupied territories. Russian forces will be forced to move back and Kyiv will regain complete control of lost lands. That's unlikely because Russian forces still have considerable resources to hold their ground. Scenario number two is a partial victory for Ukraine. What would that look like? Ukraine regains some of the lost territories. With that, they push Russia to negotiate. In that situation, Ukraine would have the upper hand and they'll be able to dictate terms with some help from its Western partners. Scenario number three would be a failed offensive. That wouldn't play out well for Kyiv. If the counteroffensive fails, Western support for Ukraine will certainly decline, and they could be forced to accept a deal on Russia's terms. So the stakes are high for everyone. Russia is putting pressure on Ukraine. It has intensified attacks on Kyiv. Once again, several explosions were heard this morning. Overnight, Russia launched 40 cruise missiles and about 35 drones. There were no casualties, but some buildings were left damaged. Zelensky has spoken out. He says his country suffered the largest Russian attack yet.
Today, our state went through one of the largest Russian attacks by Shahed drones, 54 drones at a time. Almost all of them were shot down. Unfortunately, there were some hits in the Zhytomyr region. We will do everything to help restore what has been destroyed.
Zelensky is now pushing Ukraine's parliament. He wants sanctions against Iran. Don't know how much will that help. Meanwhile, Russia has issued fresh threats to the West. This is overtraining Ukrainian pilots on F-16 jets. Russian foreign minister called this an unacceptable escalation.
Of course, this is an unacceptable escalation. I think that there are still reasonable people in the West who understand this. But everything is dictated by Washington, London, and their satellites that are inside the European Union, primarily the Baltic countries, Poland, who are implementing the task set by the United States on the ground to weaken Russia, to inflict a strategic defeat on it.
So that's the message from Russia. Expect the war of words to intensify as Ukraine pushes ahead with this counteroffensive. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to visit the US next month. There's a lot on the agenda, from trade to security to Ukraine. But ahead of the visit, a US House panel has made an interesting pitch. It says India should join the NATO Plus arrangement. I know you must have a lot of questions, like what is this House panel? What is NATO Plus? And should India join it? Let's start with the first question. The proposal was made by the House Select Committee on the strategic competition between the US and the Chinese Communist Party. Yes, it's a mouthful, but it's more commonly called the China Committee. And what has this committee said? Let me quote. Including India in NATO Plus security arrangements would build upon the US and India's close partnership to strengthen global security and deter the aggression of the CCP across the Indo-Pacific region. So that answers the first question. Secondly, what is NATO Plus? Think of it as NATO's extended family. Right now, there are 5 NATO plus members: Australia, New Zealand, Israel, Japan and South Korea. What's common about them? They are not Atlantic countries, which is why they are part of NATO plus and not NATO. You may ask, what's the difference? For starters, no mutual defense. NATO members are bound by Article 5. This article says an attack on one member is an attack on all. It's called collective security. NATO plus members do not get this shield. What they do get is this: more intelligence sharing, more weaponry and more military cooperation. Now to the final question: what should India do about this pitch? Well, right now, it's a recommendation. Such an offer has not been made by the US government. Neither has New Delhi expressed interest in it. But recently, there have been exchanges. In 2019, India held its first meeting with NATO. It was more political than military, sort of like getting to know each other. Then in March 2023, there was another meeting. America's NATO envoy said the door was opening for more engagement with India. But again, NATO plus wasn't mentioned. So how should New Delhi see this recommendation? With a lot of doubts. Politically, the recommendation shows India's importance to the West, how it sees India as a rising power. But there is a downside. The panel also sees India as a means to an end. That end being China. Let's face it, that's a dangerous place to be, because NATO is famous for using and throwing allies. And that's just one part of the problem. India's foreign policy is built on strategic autonomy, meaning New Delhi is close to everyone, to the US, to Europe, to Russia. But joining NATO plus would limit that autonomy. It would push India closer to the West. Chances are that will hamper relations with Russia. You see, neutrality is very delicate. And right now, India is in the perfect place. It is a member of the Quad, but it is also a member of the SCO. It is invited to the G7 summit. Yet, it is also part of BRICS. Joining NATO plus would tip that balance. Another issue is the level of commitment and cooperation required. Just look at the other NATO plus members. Australia and New Zealand fought 2 world wars with America. That's how old the partnership is. Japan and South Korea are part of America's nuclear umbrella. And the US-Israel relationship doesn't need an introduction. The US is Israel's biggest political and military partner. See the problem? India's relationship with the US is very different. It is not based on shared history or treaties or culture. It is based on strategic considerations. And what is New Delhi's strategic consideration right now? To create a multipolar world, to build closer relationships with Russia and the West. NATO doesn't permit that. Neither does NATO plus. It's an alliance rooted in the Cold War era of binaries. You are either with us or against us. Such an attitude doesn't serve India's foreign policy. Does that mean India should cut off all engagements? Absolutely not. NATO is the most powerful alliance in human history. Engaging with it is common sense. But joining it? That's the red line India shouldn't cross. There are ways to deepen engagement without joining NATO plus, like the Quad, or simply bilateral cooperation. That gives India more wiggle room in foreign policy. There's big news in the US. Joe Biden has struck a debt deal. He should finally be able to raise the debt ceiling, meaning no default, no doomsday for the global economy. The deal was struck over the weekend by Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The full document was released on Sunday. Now comes the big task: convincing lawmakers to pass the bill. Biden has called the deal a compromise. McCarthy has called it worthy of the American people. Both sides have made some concessions. The key is to convince hardliners in both parties that those concessions were necessary.
We've just spoke with Speaker McCarthy, and we've reached a bipartisan budget agreement that we're ready to move to the full Congress. And I think it's a really important step forward. And this is a deal is good news, I believe you'll see, for the American people. The agreement prevents the worst possible crisis, a default, for the first time in our nation's history.
I'm not sure who you're talking to, because we did a conference call with our conference, and over 95% were overwhelmingly excited about what they see. They're getting the text today in the process.
So what's in this all-important deal? The most important part is the debt ceiling itself. It has suspended until January 2025, which means the US government can borrow again. That deadline is also important for Biden. He faces re-election in November 2024, so he won't have to negotiate another debt ceiling, at least not in this term. Let me quickly run you through the rest. Non-military spending for 2024 will be the same as 2023, meaning a cap on spending. But in 2025, it can be increased by 1%. That will make the Republicans happy. At the same time, spending on military and veterans will increase. That's something Biden pushed for. He's also agreed to slash spending on tax collection. Biden had set aside $80 billion to hunt tax evaders. That's been reduced by $10 billion. Most Social Security and Medicare schemes have been retained. But there are new work requirements for government aid. Like I said, both sides have compromised. But it doesn't matter what we think. What matters is whether hardline Republicans and Democrats will support it. Especially Republicans. They hold a wafer-thin majority in the US House. Plus, Kevin McCarthy is not in absolute control. He himself was elected Speaker on the 15th ballot. So the question is, can McCarthy get the bill passed? If he can't, all this will be for nothing. We'll be back to square one. So right now, that's the biggest worry for Biden, getting this deal passed in the House and Senate. The stock markets have rebounded after news of the deal trickled in. Oil prices have also recovered. So the short-term impact has been good. But what about the long term? How will this deal affect the US economy? Many experts are worried about the spending cap. Expenditure for 2024 has been capped at the 2023 levels. That could hurt American recovery. Bloomberg says there is a 65% risk of recession in the US. To avoid that, spending must increase. It's Economics 101. If you want to reverse an economic downturn, you must spend more. This deal prevents that. Spending will not increase next year. And the year after, it will increase by just 1%. Problem number 2 is liquidity. Once the deal is passed, the US Treasury will hit overdrive. It will have to raise a lot of money in very little time. How do they do that? By issuing bonds to the private sector. It's normal business for the Treasury, but this time the scale is massive. If the Treasury usually issues 10 bonds in one day, it will now have to issue 20. This could suck liquidity out of the system, reduce the amount on money held by the private sector. And what happens when liquidity disappears? Again, slow down. Bank of America says the impact will be equivalent to a 25 basis point interest hike. That's not good news for the US economy, especially not right now. All these challenges tell us one thing. The US debt ceiling is dangerous. Maybe it promotes bipartisanship and accountability, but only if the leaders are mature enough. In modern-day America, that doesn't seem to be the case. Leaders have repeatedly weaponized the debt ceiling, used it to politically blackmail the sitting president. So maybe that should be the biggest takeaway from this crisis, the irrelevance for the debt ceiling. Speaking of debt, China has its own share of trouble as well. Local governments in China are drowning in debt. They are in a pretty bad place. Just how bad? Let me tell you. The city of Wuhan has decided to name and shame borrowers. They have printed a list of 259 entities in the state newspaper. How much money do they owe? Around 300 million yuan, which is around $42 million. Some of these loans date back to December 2018. And who are these borrowers? A range of businesses. Car companies, financial bureaus, real estate firms, all of them owe money to the Wuhan government. This is the first time the city has resorted to such a strategy. The desperation is almost childlike. Think back to your school days. Remember when talkative students had their names written on the blackboard? This is very similar. So the question is, what's happening in Wuhan? Is the city running out of cash? Wuhan's revenue in the first quarter of this year was $7 billion. On paper, that's a lot. But compare it to last year. The revenue is 8.5% less compared to quarter 1 of 2022. So liquidity crunch could be one reason. You need money to pay your own debt. The Wuhan government has asked these 250 plus entities to repay the loans immediately. But here's the problem. Wuhan is just a small part of a much bigger issue. Like I said, China's local governments are drowning in debt. How much money are we talking about? According to Goldman Sachs, $23 trillion. That's how big the debt pile is. Let me put that number in perspective. China's entire GDP is around $12 trillion. So the total government debt is twice the national GDP. This raises two questions. Number one, why were so many loans taken? And number two, will there be a crisis down the line? Most of these loans were taken in the last 2 decades. That's when China began a building spree. Ports, highways, high-rises, China was building at the rate of knots. That infrastructure push was backed by loans. But will it backfire? That's where experts are divided. You see, most of this debt is owned by state banks. So the central government in Beijing has a lot of power over it. They can just ask the banks to roll over the payments or maybe extend the deadline. But for how long? Eventually, these local governments will have to repay, and that's where revenue is a problem. Local government debt was 120% of revenue in 2022. In some cities, it's even worse, like Hegang in northeastern China. By 2021, their total debt had risen to 30 billion yuan. That's 230% of their income. Think of it this way. You have taken a lot of loans from your brother. Your debt is now more than your income. The good news is the lender is family. Maybe he will extend the deadline. The bad news is you will have to pay eventually. For local governments, that means tightening the screws, smaller budgets, more taxes, and lesser expenses. Also, more ways of raising funds, which brings us back to Wuhan. The local government's move shows how desperate they are for cash. Any money is good money right now.
Multi-prayer, multi-faith prayer that happened, but then everything else, I mean, what should be a constitutional function for parliament, for elected representatives, the will of the people as it were, became a quasi-religious function.
It always is, any part of the world, wherever these things happen, American president takes oath on a Bible, right? It's, for namesake, it's a secular country. It's a secular country. Perhaps they are more secular in their approach than many other countries in the world. But yet it is that. Recently, Rishi Sunak...
Now let's talk about Turkey. The results are in. The Turkish people have spoken. It's 5 more years of Recep Tayyip Erdogan as president. These elections are the biggest threat to his power. He was taken all the way by his challenger, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. It came down to a second-round runoff, but eventually Erdogan triumphed. Despite his botched handling of the economy, despite his slow reaction to the earthquakes in February, the Turkish people have overlooked all his failings and given Erdogan another chance. How free and fair were the elections? The opposition claims they were not. Kılıçdaroğlu says they were the most unfair in years, but he hasn't disputed the outcome. So Erdogan has won his 11th election in a row, his last election apparently. Here's our report.
This was the Turkish capital Ankara last night. Thousands gathered to congratulate their leader. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has won again. He will remain Turkey's president till 2028. With this victory, he enters his 3rd decade in power.
We are very happy, full of joy. I can't even contain myself. I thank God.
Today is our happy day. Our president has won. I feel like I'm going on a pilgrimage to Mecca.
The victory is ours. We are very happy. By Mr. Kemal, thank God, Islam has won.
She says Islam has won. That's because of Erdogan's politics.
Erdogan is unabashedly a nationalist and centers his politics around religion. He has a strongman image to boot. This persona and his longevity were always going to help him, despite the disasters that Turkey is going through. Economically, Turkey is in big trouble. The lira fell to a record low against the US dollar today. It's trading at 20.10 to the dollar. It's a reflection of Erdogan's economic mismanagement. He's overseen the lira's value fall by 90% over the last decade. His unorthodox economic policies have been blamed for the lira's crash and record inflation in the country. Erdogan has also overseen a sharp turn to political Islam while in power, away from the secular politics Turkey had embraced when it became a republic in 1923. Erdogan has also been chipping away at democratic institutions over the years. He has turned Turkey from a parliamentary democracy to a presidential one. He's concentrated the power of the presidential office. Overall, Erdogan has done much to erode Turkey's republican credentials. The opposition had vowed to undo this damage, but Turkish voters still narrowly rejected them. Erdogan won with 52% of the vote in this runoff election. His opponent, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, got about 48%. It was Erdogan's toughest ever election. He faced a coalition of opposition parties with Kılıçdaroğlu at their helm. The secular candidate vowed to fix Turkey. He pushed Erdogan to the wire, but Erdogan still prevailed. He delivered a diplomatic speech after his victory.
No one has lost today. All 85 million have won. As a requirement of the responsibility given to us by our nation, we are not offended, resentful, angry or enraged with anyone. It is now time to put aside all the debates and conflicts regarding the election period and unite around our national goals and national dreams.
His opponent, Kılıçdaroğlu, has accepted the loss. However, he has vowed to keep fighting for democracy.
The will of the people to change the authoritarian rule is clear despite all the pressures. Now I have something to ask you, for yourselves, for your children, for the retirees, for our mothers and fathers, for our farmers and traders' brothers. Support the democracy struggle.
Erdogan has said he will not contest again, that he will give up power in 2028. Turkey has reposed faith in the tried and tested. But what will another 5 years of rule by the Turkish strongman mean for his country?
Closer to Turkey, tensions are growing between Iran and the Taliban. They are trading gunfire. Over the weekend, lethal clashes broke out at the border. At least 3 people have died, 2 Iranian border guards and 1 Taliban fighter. Threats are being issued by both sides. The situation is being described as dangerous by some observers. But what triggered the tensions in the first place? Well, this dispute is about water, specifically the Helmand River. It is the longest river of Afghanistan, stretching more than 2,000 miles. Both Iran and Afghanistan depend on the Helmand. It originates in the high mountains of the Hindu Kush and feeds into the wetlands of Iran. In recent weeks, the river has sparked tensions. Iran says it is not getting access to Helmand's waters. It accuses the Taliban of throttling the river's flow. The Taliban denies the charge, but over the weekend, the dispute took an ugly turn. There was shooting at Nimroz, at a border checkpoint. Nimroz is a border province of Afghanistan. We don't know exactly what happened. Both sides accuse the other of opening fire. After the clashes, Iran is said to have closed an important border crossing, the Milak Zaranj post. This is a commercial crossing. It is away from the area where the clashes happened. It is believed Iran closed this post in response to the firing. So it is clear, all is not well between Iran and Afghanistan. This is not the first time this has happened. The dispute is over Helmand's waters. This is an old one. Its origins can be traced back to the 1940s and 50s. During those years, Afghanistan built 2 major dams along the Helmand. This had alarmed the Iranians. because the country had experienced intense droughts. In 1973, a water-sharing treaty was signed, but the dispute was never resolved. Iran says the treaty is not being honoured. In recent weeks, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has issued repeated warnings. I have the statements with me. Listen to this. This is Raisi talking about the water dispute with the Taliban, and I quote, "We will not allow the rights of our people to be violated. I warn the rulers of Afghanistan to immediately give the people their water rights. Take my words seriously now or don't complain later."
I warn the rulers of Afghanistan to immediately give the people of Sistan-Baluchistan their water rights. The Afghan side should allow our experts to go for evaluation straight away. If our experts confirm the lack of water, we have nothing else to say. Otherwise, we will not allow the rights of our people to be violated.
So what was the Taliban's response? Well, Kabul hasn't taken the criticism kindly. They have issued their own threats. Again, I have some statements. This is from the Taliban's defense ministry. Making excuses for war and negative actions is not in the interest of any of the parties. Kabul rejects the charge that it hasn't honored the treaty, so neither side is mincing their words. And this dispute could worsen bilateral ties. In recent months, both sides have made progress. In February, Iran took a major decision. It handed over the Afghan embassy in Tehran to the Taliban. Iran also accepted Taliban-appointed diplomats. It wasn't a formal recognition of the Taliban regime, but the move brought the two sides closer. The water wars could reverse this progress. Reports say both sides have held talks. Attempts are being made to diffuse tensions. Remains to be seen if diplomacy can solve this. New Delhi will be watching very closely. India depends on Iran for its engagements with Afghanistan. This year, India shipped humanitarian assistance to Afghans. Wheat consignments were delivered via the Chabahar port. Last year, India had sent a technical team to Kabul to coordinate the delivery of humanitarian assistance. So India will be monitoring the situation at the borders. This is a developing story, and we'll keep a track of the latest developments. Now let's talk about space, the final frontier. Turns out the race to conquer that frontier is heating up. Over the last week, we've seen a flurry of space-related activity. Let's start with India. The Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, has launched a satellite today. The GSLV F-12 rocket successfully took to the skies. It took off from the Satish Dhawan Space Center in Sriharikota in the state of Andhra Pradesh. The rocket carried the NVS-01 next-generation navigation satellite into orbit. The satellite has both civilian and military applications. It helps with navigation, positioning, and timing services. It even carries an indigenous atomic clock for precise timekeeping. Some other big news greeted Indian space enthusiasts as well. ISRO's chief confirmed that the Chandrayaan-3 lunar exploration mission will launch this July. The planned date is July 12. If successful, it will expand India's footprint on the moon and certify India's growing space credentials. Of course, India isn't the only nation looking to the stars. South Korea launched its first homegrown commercial-grade rocket last Thursday. It ejected several satellites to observe cosmic radiation. On Friday, NASA launched a pair of its tropic storm research satellites. Russia launched a Soyuz rocket carrying a Condor reconnaissance satellite on Saturday. And even China had some big space news to share today.
The General Command has studied and decided to target the launch of the Shenzhou 16 manned spacecraft at 9:31 Beijing time on May 30th. The flight crew consists of astronauts Jing Haipeng, Zhu Yangchu, and Gui Haichao. Jing Haipeng served as the commander.
Of particular interest is the third astronaut.
Payload expert Gui Haichao is a professor at Beihang University. He is mainly responsible for the on-orbit operation of space science experimental payloads. He received professional training in fields such as science and aerospace engineering and has rich operational experience.
This is the first time China is sending a civilian into space. Every other Chinese astronaut has been a member of the People's Liberation Army. This marks a new stage in Chinese space activities. And that's not all.
Recently, the lunar landing phase of China's manned lunar exploration project has been launched and implemented. The overall goal is to achieve the first Chinese landing on the moon by 2030, conduct lunar scientific research and related technical experiments, and master key technologies such as Earth-to-Moon round-trip, short-term lunar surface stay, and human-machine joint exploration, and complete multiple tasks such as landing, patrol, mining, research and return.
Yes, China is also ramping up its lunar mission. It reiterated its goal of sending people to the moon by 2030. We had told you about Beijing's lunar plans a few days ago and about how the US is wary of China's growing space capabilities. That was on full display over the weekend. Brigadier General Jesse Morehouse of the US Space Command made a statement, and I quote, "The United States of America is ready to fight tonight in space if we have to." Morehouse cited Russia's aggression and China's vision to become a dominant space power as the reason. He said it left the US with no choice but to prepare for orbital skirmishes. And what is the US doing to prepare? Developing anti-satellite technologies. Think about all the satellite launches over the last week we mentioned. They show how essential satellites are to our day-to-day lives. And countries know this. They know that enemy nations can be crippled by taking out their satellites. Russia and China are building spacecraft capable of anti-satellite operations. Russia, China, the US and India have tested ground-based anti-satellite missiles. It's a new avenue for war, and countries are getting ready. Add this to the rapid rocket launches, and we are seeing a new competition emerge, a new scramble for the moon, a new space race, and this time, India is right there among the competitors. And now let's turn our attention to Canada. It is burning. Its eastern city of Halifax has declared an emergency. It is suffering from wildfires. Homes are going up in flames. There are power outages and hundreds of people are being evacuated. The fire has sent a huge pall of smoke over the city, but this port city is not the only one facing the brunt of wildfires. Hundreds of other wildfires are burning in Canada. Why is this happening, and what measures is Canada taking? Our next report tells you.
That's fire.
What you just saw is a dashcam video. It shows a car being driven through Halifax. This is an eastern Canadian city, and a wildfire is ravaging the port city, burning out of control. These visuals are shocking, but they aren't the only ones. Look at this huge pall of smoke. This too is a result of the same wildfire, which sent up a huge cloud of smoke over the port city. This looks scary because it is. There are flames everywhere. Roads are affected. Houses are burning. There are power outages. All in all, the situation is hazardous. And Halifax has declared a state of local emergency, which will be in effect for at least a week. Meanwhile, evacuations are underway. But this horrific experience is not limited to this eastern Canadian city. It is being shared by Western Canadian province too, Alberta. Except here, the situation is much worse. Unprecedented wildfires are raging in Alberta, which too has declared an emergency. This province is home to 4 million people, tens of thousands of whom have been displaced. Their homes are burning. Millions of hectares of land has been charred by fire. About 2 weeks ago, this is what the authorities said.
Our peak burning period, which is when the temperatures are at their highest and the fuels are at their driest, is still in front of us.
They were right. The skies are still choking in smoke. There is no end in sight for these record-breaking fires. Question is, why is this happening? During the spring, the snow begins to melt. This exposes tree branches and dead leaves underneath. Experts call this fuel because they are flammable. And warm temperatures and dry conditions only increase the flammability, both of which Canada saw this year. It dived into summer with record-breaking temperatures and a terrible heat wave, especially in areas like Alberta and British Columbia, which saw both record-breaking heat and below-average rainfall, which was even 75 to 100% less than usual in some areas. This just made the entire situation worse. And this is alarming. Parts of Canada do see wildfires, but they don't usually come this early. What's more, they aren't usually this spread out. Authorities are working to control these wildfires, but this time it's challenging because big wildfires aren't concentrated to a specific part. There are a lot of big ones spread across different territories. About 100 wildfires burned just Alberta, and Canada is doing its bit to get things under control. But matters are only getting worse. Much of the fire season is still left. Experts say there is no end in sight. It seems like there will be months before the situation comes under control, which only feels like a trailer for what is to come. As our climate warms, we expect to see more fire, more power disruptions, more burning houses, more people displaced, and many more clouds of smoke. Unseasonal heat has become more frequent, probable, and intense, all because of human action. Our world is on fire. Question is, when will we wake up and smell the smoke?
For our last story today, let's talk about Venice, the floating city of Italy, which is known for its beautiful bridges and winding canals. But this weekend, it woke up to an unusual sight. Its central waterway has turned green. Now, let's set our expectations right. The Venice canals don't have crystal clear blue waters. Everyone knows that. We're used to their dirty, dark green colors. But this time, the canal water has turned bright green. It feels like Hulk took a bath in the water, or that Shrek the ogre made the canal its secret home. You would even expect Kermit the Frog to suddenly emerge out of the water, but with an army of several other green frogs. Because this green patch doesn't seem like the work of just one wholesome frog. Don't believe us? Here's a report.
This is Venice, the city of canals, arguably one of Italy's most picturesque cities. But now it has an odd green problem. Look at these visuals. This is the city's central waterway, and now a patch of water in it has turned fluorescent green. Perplexing, right? The Venetians can relate. They have no idea where this green patch came from, but they're quite keen on finding out. Local authorities have begun an urgent investigation. They've collected water samples which will be tested for answers. But while the world awaits them, it has turned to conspiracy theories. Many speculations are floating across the internet, but one of them seems plausible. It suggests that the green water is a mark of protest, that environmental activists released dye into the water, and that this dye turned water green. This is not difficult to believe. After all, a wave of disruptive activism has swept across Europe, and environmental awareness groups have hit Italy as well. This month itself, a climate action group stepped into Rome's Trevi fountain. It's a popular tourist spot, and its water was mixed with diluted charcoal. Soon the water of this beautiful fountain turned black. But even if we stick to the color green, this is not the first time Italy has witnessed something like this. In fact, it feels like history is being repeated. Let's go back to 1968. This is an Argentine artist named Nicolas Garcia Uriburu. He dyed the waters of the Grand Canal in Venice green. Why? To raise awareness of ecological issues. Venice has been of particular interest to environmental activists because it is one of the world's most fragile cities, constantly threatened by rising sea levels. It was hit by major floods in 2019. While those waters receded, its problems haven't. The city is literally sinking. So it has now come up with an ambitious $6 billion plan to save Venice from flooding. The city has also instituted strict rules for tourists. The authorities want their help in preserving the environment. But this hasn't calmed environmentalists. They want the government to do better. And some have resorted to chaos to gain eyeballs. It's not clear whether this incident is an act of protest or not. The investigation has only just begun. So far, it indicates that people need not be scared. Investigators say this green patch has been caused by a harmless dye called fluorescein. It's used to track the flow of water. This substance is not uncommon. But here's the catch. Usually experts use 1 spoonful of this dye to analyze water flow. But in this case, it seems like at least 1 kg of the dye was dumped in the water. Talk about getting your calculations wrong. But was it deliberate or an accident? It's difficult to believe that something like this just slipped into the canal like an oops moment. Whatever may be the reason, as long as a giant green squid monster is not releasing ink into the water, there's no need to feel blue over this fluorescent green.
And with that, it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with Chile, thousands of people gathered in Santiago to break a Guinness World Record. People formed the largest human image of a bicycle. In the US, Olympic champion Carissa Moore won women's title at Surf Ranch Pro. And SpaceX launched its latest Falcon 9 rocket on Saturday. And finally, what makes May 29th significant? Taking you back in history. On this day in 1953, for the first time, two explorers reached the top of the world's highest mountain, the Everest. Edmund Hillary was a beekeeper from New Zealand, and Tenzing Norgay was a skilled climber from Nepal. Mount Everest Day marks their remarkable accomplishment. We leave you with that. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Welcomed and congratulated by their fellow members of the expedition. Poor Tenzing descended from his glory into the center of a minor political storm. He was born in Nepal and grew up in India, and both nations are now at loggerheads to claim him as their national. However, Tenzing was unruffled when Colonel Hunt congratulated him and Hillary. Two unassuming men had climbed the 29,000-foot monarch of the Himalayas.
Moving through the clouds there, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off. There's that gorgeous view on your screen there of the...
Religion or some part of it.
So let me ask Anand Nilakandan, respond to this criticism that by having, Hindu rituals and the Sengol being given pride of place from the TMC and other opposition parties is that you are now making this into almost like a religious state as opposed to, it's parliament, it's a democratic enterprise, not something that's linked to one's faith.
I think this is a very Western notion of secularism we are talking about. It is a very inclusive way in which India has always taken all religions, including atheism. So there was an all-prayer meeting there, isn't it? There was an all-prayer meeting there, and all religions were respected. And these are all the cultural aspects of the country. You cannot desist away from the culture. You cannot move away from the culture and say that no, everything will kill. It's a very religious country. Personally, people could be atheists, people could believe in any religion, but it is all inclusive about even, see the Republic Day parade, not just what is happening now. It was right from the beginning of the Republic Day parades. We were showing all aspects of our country, the entire diversity, and it had a lot of religious themes in that, isn't it? Even now it always had religious themes. So
what they're arguing is that yesterday's ceremony had an overt, there were Havans and Puja and the Sengol and the Adinams. Yes, there was a multi-faith prayer that happened, but then everything else, what should be a constitutional function for parliament, for elected representatives, the will of the people, as it were, became a quasi-religious function.
It always is, any part of the world, wherever these things happen, American president takes oath on a Bible, right? It's for namesake, it's a secular country. It's a secular country. Perhaps they are more secular in their approach than many other countries in the world. But yet it is that. Recently, Rishi Sunak, who is a practicing Hindu, in the coronation of their king, was reading from the things of Bible. Because it is a tradition, it is a culture of the country. It has to do with what has...
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Breaking news coming in from Jammu and Kashmir, where there has been another targeted killing in the Kashmir Valley. Deepak Kumar, who worked at an amusement park in Anantnag, was shot by terrorists and then succumbed to his injuries at the hospital. Deepak Kumar was a resident of Udhampur in the Jammu region, ladies and gentlemen. A joint operation has been launched by the security forces to nab the terrorists involved in the attack. That's the piece of breaking news that's coming in from Jammu and Kashmir, where it seems targeted killings have returned. Now, a resident of Udhampur, his name was Deepak Kumar, was gunned down by terrorists in Anantnag. He worked at an amusement park in Anantnag and was shot by terrorists. He then succumbed to his injuries at the local hospital. I'm joined by my colleague Ishan Wani, who's joining us on the broadcast. Ishan, give us the details.
Well, yes, there has been a lull in terms of civilian targeted killings, but today, again, these militant outfits carrying out civilian targeted killing, where Deepu, who's a resident of Udhampur in Jammu Division, was shot at. He was working at a private circus mela at an amusement park near Janglat Mandi in Anantnag. This is the main Anantnag area where he was shot at. He was taken to the hospital, but that is where he has come to his injuries. Now, police has started an investigation. The area has been cordoned off by joint security force of CRPF and Jammu and Kashmir police, but in all likelihood, after carrying such attacks, these militants tried to get away. There have been heightened security arrangements, and recently G20 went on peacefully. But yes, targeted killings had stopped for a while. In Pulwama, if you recall, a Kashmiri Pandit was shot and killed, earlier this year. And ever since then, there were tight security measures taken by the security forces, which ensured that the civilians were not targeted. But yet again, it seems like, civilians are coming under attack again. This will prompt security response from the security forces, who might, once again try to see that how they can prevent these attacks. Because this attack has taken place after a gap of almost 3 months, and this will definitely prompt security forces to carry out action, against these outfits, because once again, these outfits are now carrying out these targeted killings. Remember, during the G20 summit, there was a massive security arrangement which was done, and just as the G20 has, ended, we are also entering next month Amarnath Yatra. So yes, this is something which will be critically seen by the security forces, and they'll try to ensure that they're able to dominate these areas.
Right. I'm also joined by Tejinder Singh Sodhi on the phone line. Tejinder, another targeted killing, this one a resident of Udhampur in the Jammu region. Any terror group has taken responsibility for this murder?
See, Ashman, as my colleague Ishan from Srinagar was mentioning, that this target killing comes after a gap of almost 3 months, when a Hindu from Jammu region has been targeted. Once again, a member of the Hindu community has been targeted by the terrorists, and he has been killed. He has been identified as Deepak Kumar alias Deepu. He's a resident of Udhampur district of Jammu region. So far, no terror outfit has taken the responsibility for this cowardly terror attack. But in all, it seems that the handiwork of the resistance front, because if you see in the recent past also, whenever there has been a similar kind of target killing across Kashmir Valley, it has been the handiwork of the TRF. As Ishan was also pointing out, that recently Jammu and Kashmir witnessed a successful G20 event that happened in Kashmir Valley, wherein a large number of delegates from almost 20 countries, they participated. And this is something which has frustrated the terrorists in Kashmir Valley and also their handlers in Pakistan. The security agencies, they have been getting inputs that terrorists, in order to vent out their frustration, would once again try to show their presence by carrying out attacks on innocent civilians or by launching Fidain attacks on the security establishment across the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. And as we all know that now the security forces they have launched a massive cordon and search operation in the entire Anantnag area where this terror attack has taken place to nab or neutralize the terrorists who are involved in carrying out this attack on an innocent civilian who was earning his livelihood by working as a laborer in an amusement park, this private circus or a mela that was going on in the Janglat Mandi area of Anantnag. So this Deepu or Deepak Kumar, his full name is Deepak Kumar, alias Deepu, he was working as a laborer and he has been shot dead by the terrorists. Yes.
Right, and at the same time, Tejinder, as you are pointing out, this has come after a lull, after a couple of months, and especially after the G20 meeting where there was this very tight security grid, especially in the Kashmir Valley. Describe to us the situation in Anantnag where these terrorists are able to carry out such operations so successfully and then hide away into the local areas where it's tough for the security forces to track them down. In your opinion, is this security grid now going to be tightened further? And at the same time, these retaliatory attacks coming in from groups like the TRF, are they coming in because they're on their last leg in the Kashmir Valley?
See, indeed, Ayushman, you hit the nail on its head wherein you say that these terror outfits, they are just in their last leg in Kashmir Valley. The terrorism from Kashmir Valley has almost been completely wiped out by the security forces. But if you see that these terrorists, if security forces foil at least 100 such incidents, but these terrorists, when they succeed in carrying out one such terror attack, it makes headlines. But those 100 terror attacks which are foiled every day by the security forces, they don't come into notice. If you remember, just yesterday there were hundreds and almost 10,000 Kashmiri Pandits who from various parts of the country participated in the annual Kheer Bhavani Mela. They travelled to Kashmir Valley to take part in the Mela, and the Mela went on peacefully. Now in the couple of weeks, the annual Amarnath Yatra would begin, and the security establishment would work really hard to ensure that the Amarnath Yatra passes off peacefully. But these terror outfits, they look for an opportunity to carry out such type of attacks across Kashmir Valley, and targeting an innocent civilian who goes to Kashmir Valley to earn his livelihood is no bravery for these terror outfits. This is just a cowardly attack, attacking an unarmed innocent civilian who earns his livelihood in Kashmir Valley. It shows the level of frustration that these terror outfits are going through. Yes, Ayushman.
Right, but Tejinder, before I let you go, we're also getting some news that the Kashmir Freedom Fighters, the KFF, has taken responsibility for the killing of Deepak Kumar. Can you give us more context as to their role in the Kashmir Valley?
See, Ayushman, these are the terror outfits, just the pseudo names for the main terror outfits like the Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Every single day you see that these pseudo names are being used by the Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba and Hizbul Mujahideen. These are the main three terror outfits which are being operated from across the border from Pakistan, occupied Kashmir from Pakistan, and the arms and ammunition are also supplied by Pakistan. But in order to show the global community that this is just an indigenous uprising which Pakistan has completely failed, so every other day you come to see these names like the TRF, which we know is a frontal of Lashkar-e-Toiba, whereas the PAFF, the People's Anti-Fascist Front, is also a frontal for Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. So these terror outfits, the KFF, the Kashmir Freedom Fighters, which is also a frontal or a pseudo name by being used by these terror outfits. In the past also we have seen these terror outfits claiming responsibility of civilian killings, but the security agencies know that these are just the operatives of the Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba who carry out such type of cowardly terror attack on civilians across Kashmir Valley. Those civilians who are unarmed, those civilians who come to Kashmir Valley just to earn their livelihood. If you remember, last year also we saw a school teacher, Rajni Bala, and several Deepak Chand and several such innocent civilians being gunned down by these terrorists just as to vent out their frustration. Yes, Ayushman.
Right. Thank you, Tejinder, for getting us that piece of breaking news. tragic story coming in from the Kashmir Valley, where a resident of the Jammu region has been gunned down in the Kashmir Valley in Anantnag. His name was Deepak Kumar. He was working at a local amusement park. And what we are learning is that the KFF, which is the Kashmir Freedom Fighters, which is a terror outfit, has claimed responsibility for this attack, as the security forces have launched an operation to track down the terrorists behind this dastardly killing. We'll continue to track all the developments which are coming in from Jammu and Kashmir, but let's shift focus from the valley to Manipur. Breaking news coming in, Union Home Minister Amit Shah has chaired a meeting with Manipur Chief Minister N. Biren Singh and other ministers, senior leaders and officials in Imphal to assess the ground situation. Amit Shah landed in Imphal earlier today. This visit comes amid the fresh violence in the state with multiple cases of firing, vandalism and arson. That's the piece of breaking news that's coming in, where Amit Shah is in Manipur to take stock of the situation. I'm joined by my colleague Kamalika Sen Gupta, who's joining us on the broadcast. Kamalika, give us the details.
Around 9:20, Union Home Minister Amit Shah arrived at Manipur and he was received by N. Biren Singh, Chief Minister, and also along with that Shambit Patra was there, the security advisors Kuldeep Singh was there, and also DG and all the senior officials were there. Right now, Amit Shah is taking stock of the situation. He first had a cabinet meeting with the entire ministers, all the ministers of Manipur, including Chief Minister. Then the governor also, he had a meeting, a scheduled meeting with him. And after that, he will also have a meeting with top security people, corps commanders. And this is something which is very important, that the moment Amit Shah arrived in Imphal, from that point of time, he is monitoring the situation in Manipur himself. He is taking stock of the situation. And again, tomorrow there is a day when Amit Shah is supposed to meet a lot of civil society people. That is what is also important, because right now in Manipur, political outreach is very much required, to bring the two communities again together. Because we have been covering since from the morning, but people on ground zero, they are not happy, they are sad, they want peace, and at the same time, they don't want both the communities to fight. So and in which way Amit Shah will find a solution, that has to be seen. And that's going to be the most important announcement here in Manipur.
Right. Kamalika, please stay with us now. Kamalika got us this ground report on Amit Shah's arrival to Imphal.
Here, Amit Shah, Union Home Minister, on a 3-day visit to Manipur amidst the fresh violence that has been reported from Manipur in Saturday and Sunday. Here is the convoy of Amit Shah. Amit Shah is going to have rounds of meeting today at night itself with the governor and the chief minister and also the cabinet of Manipur. Here you can see Amit Shah, Union Home Minister, on a crucial time in Manipur. He himself will be monitoring the security on ground, and he's himself come in Manipur to take stock of the situation. And right now he'll go to the CM Bangalore, and there he's going to meet all the security officials, the Manipur cabinet, the governor, and he's himself going to take a stock of this situation.
And as Home Minister Amit Shah takes stock of the situation in Manipur, some breaking news coming in. A curfew has been relaxed in Imphal East and Imphal West from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. So is this an indication that the situation is improving in Imphal? Now, what we are learning is that the curfew has been relaxed in Imphal East and West from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. Kamalika continues to be with us on the broadcast. Kamalika, give us the details behind this push that has come in to relax the curfew in Imphal East and West for about 6 hours.
See, there has been no untoward incidents all throughout the day in the valley, in the Imphal East and Imphal West. There has been some fringe incidents in the hills area, the bordering area to the hills. But overall, Manipur remains to be a little better today. And that is why, obviously, this thing is definitely discussed, because this curfew relaxation has been given tomorrow from morning 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. because essentials, buying the essential things are also very much required. So tomorrow it will be a different day, and And people believe, today we were talking to people out there, that things are slightly better than it was yesterday and also on Saturday. So people are really hopeful, and people in ground zero really want peace and not politics.
Right. Thank you, Kamalika, for getting us the latest when it comes to Manipur. As those visuals on your screen, Home Minister Amit Shah has landed in Manipur to take stock of the situation. Also, what we are learning is that the curfew has been eased in Imphal East and Imphal West for about 6 hours from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. This is to help locals, get their essential supplies in the morning as the situation has improved slightly in those areas. But Home Minister Amit Shah now taking stock of the situation to ensure that law and order prevails in Manipur in the wake of those violent clashes that we have seen in the past few days. And Home Minister Amit Shah has sent out that message to the rest of the country that peace will be delivered to the state of Manipur. Let's shift focus now to the gruesome story that has come in from the national capital, ladies and gentlemen. In the wake of the Shraddha Walkar murder case, another gruesome crime in the national capital has shaken the conscience of the nation. A 16-year-old girl was murdered in public by her alleged boyfriend in the Rohini area of North Delhi. She was stabbed multiple times and bludgeoned to death with a rock as bystanders just walked by and watched the killing unfold. The Delhi police launched a manhunt for the accused, a man named Sahil, who was arrested 20 hours later in Bulandshahr in Uttar Pradesh. The victim's family has said that they were unaware of any relationship with the accused and have demanded the death penalty. Politics has also erupted over the case, with the Aam Aadmi Party blaming the LG for the breakdown of law and order. The BJP, meanwhile, has said the guilty will not be spared and he will face the full force of the law. But the big question remains, could this young girl have been saved by the bystanders who could have intervened and stopped this atrocity? Stabbed 40 times. Kicked and bludgeoned with a rock. This horror from the national capital has sent shockwaves across the nation. A 16-year-old girl murdered in public by her alleged boyfriend in North Delhi's Rohini area. The whole murder was caught on CCTV, but the most shocking detail is the multiple bystanders who simply walked past this atrocity.
ये वही स्पॉट है, इसी जगह पर लड़की को गिराकर उसके ऊपर चाकू से हमला किया गया था। उसके बाद उसके बाल खींचे गए थे। जब वो पूरी